We are thrilled about the next panel, Ukrainian Culture, Defending a Millennium of Contribution. It's my honor to introduce the moderator, Mr. Björn Geldhof. He's the Artistic Director of PinchukArtCentre. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you all. Very nice to be here. I think first of all, I will introduce our panelists. We have one person who is here with us physically, and I see already two on the screen with us digitally. Let me first welcome Katarina Buchatskiy, co-founder of the Shadow Project. Please join us on stage. We have also here with us Yevgenia Klopotenko, Ukrainian, I think the most famous Ukrainian chef. Igor, very welcome. Also, not just putting food in our mouth, but also a social activist and defender of Ukrainian culture. And last but not least, Yevgenia Belorusets, absolutely, who is a writer and an artist with whom I personally have worked many, many times. And so welcome to you all. Thank you for being with us, also in a digital format. I know not all of you could come to Davos, but you're doing incredible work where you are, and I'll be very happy to hear about it. And Katja, thank you for being here in Davos, because otherwise I was sitting alone on the stage. So I think the panel is about Ukrainian culture, and I think one of the things that is important, we started in Venice a few weeks ago, a project which we did in partnership with the Ukrainian President Zelensky, where we said we are defending freedom. Ukrainian culture has now a task and has now an obligation to speak to the world and to defend Ukraine to the world. There is a so-called cultural front. And I think that's something that we want to discuss today. We want to talk about what is this cultural front? Do we have specific responsibilities? And how do we look at that towards the future? Culture always asks difficult questions, or so it should. And one of the things that we're going to talk about are some of these difficult questions. But before doing so, let me ask each and one of you, and I will start with, can I call you Katja? It will be easy for me. Katja, and I will ask the same question to the others. What does it mean for you to imagine this cultural front, and what kind of responsibility you personally feel in defending Ukraine in this war?
I think that for me, when I think about fronts of the war, culture absolutely emerges as one of the most important ones. And what that looks like to me is this historical battle over Ukraine's history, over what Ukraine is, and over Ukrainian identity. And that is what the cultural front means to me. Because what's happening now is we see Putin and we see Russia trying to take on a narrative that is not our Ukrainian narrative, and trying to change the narrative of what Ukraine is, where it came from, its history, the cultural things that it owns, its traditions, its food, and trying to distort that, claim it as its own. And so to me, the cultural front and defending this means taking charge of our own narrative, telling the world that this is Ukrainian culture, that it's ours, that we have our own vision of history, and that we have a right to our own vision of history. And owning our history is owning our sovereignty and owning our statehood. And to me, as a Ukrainian, that is one of my many responsibilities in this war, and everyone is giving a part of themselves to defend Ukraine in the ways that they can. And to me, preserving my identity specifically, distinctly as a Ukrainian is my way to make sure that our cultural boundaries and the cultural front is secure.
Thank you very much. That was a very concise answer. And let's jump immediately to Yevgenia. You have basically the same question, and you already heard the term food. Please, I'd be very happy to hear what you find the most essential right now in this cultural front, and how you personally see your role in there. We don't, just a moment, we don't hear you. We don't hear you. Is that technical issue or are you muted?
And now, it's
Perfect.
okay. Okay, so first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I want to say that Katya has very good English. I don't know, it's not much Ukrainians has such a perfect English.
She cheated. She came from the US.
Okay, that's the problem. Yeah.
Traveling, I mean.
Okay. What I'm thinking that the culture, how it is, it's forming every day, every year, and it's hard to change the culture because I think that it's not good to changing the culture. But I think that now we have a period of our history when we have some stones of our history, we have some stones of our identities, we have the stones of who are we, Ukrainians. And this war, I think 100% we will win this war. And what's going to be after the war? After the war will be Ukrainians, which have to live together and have to know how to live. But we never was living like in a normal, in a peaceful time with like everything good, because for us, it was all the time the problem to understand who we are. And I think now we have the best opportunity during all of our lifetime to understand who we are and finally not to give it back. So for me, now the cultural war and the cultural front is about saving who we are. And after the war, we should be these people who for what we are fighting for. I think it's hard to understand, but I will tell one more time. So for us, it's very important to be Ukrainians, and not only in our dreams that we are perfect people, perfect nation with the perfect relations, but we should do it. We should act this. And for what does it mean food for me? What does it mean food for like people? All around the world, the most it is the thing which we are putting every day in our organism, in our mouth, and that means that that's the food is building us. And the cultural front is to understand which food we should put. If we are putting the Russian salad or Olivier, that means that we are putting the USSR. Do we want to after the war be to have the part of USSR in our mouth and in our organism? I think no, but is the question why we should change it. And now we're doing a lot of cultural things just in the case to say to all the world that we are different and we have our food and all these things. So for me, it's just a strong understanding who finally we are.
Thank you very much, and that's also incredibly clear. I'll go to you. I think this is just the opening salvos. Yevgenia, the same question. You're looking at that from a little bit of a different perspective, so I'll be very happy to hear your view.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and it was interesting to hear both answers. I think they are both creating like kind of two poles. One answer was speaking about a statement, who we are, to make a statement. And second answer was about questioning, actually researching who we really are, look into our reality, into multiple identities that we have, and trying to figure out what we are. And I'm actually thinking that today, as also yesterday, we really should not only make the statement, which is a lot about a culture as a kind of a front, a culture that is fighting for survival. That is a statement, but also remain people who are ready to ask questions, even difficult and unpleasant questions to themselves, to discover different shades and different aspects of our past, of our today's life, and to remain. Ukraine was always about multiple realities, multiple identities, and about lots of them we even don't know how they lived, how they developed. So I think this war that made people move through Ukraine. Lots of people had to leave their houses and go to different parts of Ukraine. People on another level discovered each other. This war, with all awful crimes that it is bringing on the cultural level, can provoke us to respect more different small cultures that do exist on Ukraine and actually speak about them, make them more visible.
Thank you very much. I want to pick up on that, and especially the term you said, multiple identities. Yeah, Ukraine being consisting out of multiple identities. And Yevgen, let me come back to you and ask: do you know, you've done an incredible research into Ukrainian kitchen, Ukrainian food. You put that on the map. You also started an initiative to make borscht a UNESCO protected Ukrainian heritage. Do you agree with Yevgenia that this question of multiple identities also appears in what you are looking for? Do you discover that, and can you give examples if you did?
Yeah, it's a hard question, and it's a hard talk. Start to be. I think that all the people all around the world has the different identities. We have the family identity, we have the country identity, we have the regional identity, we have the earth identity. So it's like a 5 of identities has each person. So we should understand about what identity we are speaking about. If we are speaking about Ukraine identity, that means that in Ukraine, like everyone knows, has only one Ukrainian identity, and people, but people understand Ukraine in different level. And I was working in the family's identity, because when I took the borscht and I tried to understand, is that Ukrainian dish? Is that Kiev dish? Is that Lviv dish? Is that Donetsk dish? How I had to understand, or maybe it's even Polish dish. I don't think so, but it was the question to discover. And what I found that I had to go to the families, because when I was in a region, even in a region, it was like totally different people with totally different recipes of this borscht. If I went to the city, it was like totally different. Like it was, if we are speaking that in Odessa, everyone is cooking borscht with the fish, it's not true. Someone is cooking, someone is not. The same in Kiev, the same in Cherkasy. So I was shocked a bit, and then I went deep, and then finally when I understood that borscht has only one recipe, a family recipe, and nothing else. And if we are speaking that we have like a Chernihiv borscht, it does not exist like that, because it exists only family borscht. And it opened me such a understanding that it's not like about multiply identities. It's just about that in Ukraine we have like a million recipes of borscht, because we have million of family, but it's like has its own recipe, but it's still borscht. And I think, and I know that I speak from the food, but how I understand that it's still the same borscht, but everyone loves this borscht, and it makes everyone, each family, it makes Ukrainian family. But the recipe, how we cook it, what we put it, it's totally different. So we are different, and we are very different. And that means multiply identities. But we are the same in one identity of eating the borscht. And this philosophy, it's when we are fighting now against Russia, we are one organism, and we have one identity of Ukraine. And that's the question what we will have later, I think. When war will end, we will be speaking not about family identities, about other things. And these things will create a lot of questions. And how we'll go through this, for me, it's a scary period, because I think that one person will say that it's our identity, second one will say that it's different identity. So for me, I think that we should clearly understand that it is our, borscht is our, language is our, land is our, this history is our, and nothing else. If we will have a huge discussion, I'm not sure that we will find out at the end who we are, and everything will go in another
You know, it's tickling to get into this question, but first I will give the word to Katya. You have done your own research in Ukrainian history through the shadow projects, and without now going into, this is going to be my next question, how to engage kind of the next generation, but with the same question, do you feel that this challenge that Yevgenia passed to us about multiple identities, and I think this question is complicated in the sense that it refers to Ukraine being a melting pot. Is that something you've discovered, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I saw different interpretations and different interactions of Ukrainian identities throughout my time living in Ukraine. Even being from Kyiv with a family from Odessa, we had very different interpretations of what our Ukrainian identities meant. Which is why I co-founded the Shadows Project 1.5 years ago, because I was sitting around with some of my Ukrainian friends and we were discussing these things about our culture, our history, what our identities mean to us, and we realized that there were a lot of interesting discrepancies, and a lot of people interacted with Ukraine and what Ukraine means in different ways, which is not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a very interesting thing. And I think that the reason that this is the case is because for so long, interacting with your Ukrainian identity was severely repressed, and under centuries of imperialism, under centuries of occupation, it was not necessarily out in the open. A lot of people had to practice their Ukrainian traditions, had to make their Ukrainian recipes. They had to do this, excuse my pun, in the shadows. And so for this reason, it was very hard to develop one cohesive, unified identity without all these different distinctions, because everyone is practicing in their own circle and people are practicing in their own regions in different ways. And now that we are celebrating, or we're celebrating last year our 30th year of independence, and we can finally come together as a nation and try to understand what we went through and what our history is, we realized, me and my friends sitting around, that there were a lot of different ways that people carried Ukraine with them during repression. And that brings us to why we founded the Shadows Project, to come together and figure out what these discrepancies mean, if there is some kind of unifying theme that we can pull together, how we can have these multiple identities interact with each other in a healthy way. And I think that that's going to be the next step, and I think that that's what we're going to be continuing to do, especially as we strengthen our national identity after our victory and come together and have a conversation with all of us. And so this multiple identities is something that I've seen very firsthand, but I think it's such an interesting thing and a sign of how our culture has persisted for so long, because the fact that it's managed to persist through these centuries of repression and it's still here in all of its differences and all of its beauties is extremely impressive.
Thank you very much. I think I wanna dig a little bit into it. Yevgen, I'm going to come back to you. Saying yesterday when we have small preparation, you made this this nice comparison. You said, well, the US through McDonald's really kind of made an identification of itself, and Ukraine should do the same. I think when we speak about identity building through culture, yeah, and food culture in your perspective, what is that? What is the DNA, as we can say, of what Ukrainian food and what Ukrainian cultural food identity should be on one hand, but can become perhaps on the next?
Yeah, I told you that I was studying and I was like discovering how the different, how Italy, France, US, Japan start to be famous, and Thai food, how it started to be famous in the world. And the simplest thing is like just to give the food, to sell the food. If you buy some burger, you buy some part of the US, and that's all. And now if I will ask someone who is sitting here, name me 5 dishes of the US, everyone will say burgers and maybe steaks and like nothing else. So it's maybe very like, it's called soft power, you know, but it's not very soft. It's a very hard power. So I hope and I think that Ukrainian cuisine now in a very lucky place, and how we will use this lucky place, nobody knows. And that's why what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do. And now I'm sitting in Ivano-Frankivsk and I'm opening the Ukrainian fast food like in 1 hour, because I want to create something, not only borscht Ukrainian food, but we have like 10-15 dishes which we should sell now to the world. We should give opportunity for the people who are now living in different parts of the world to open small businesses and start to earn money on these businesses. And if the businesses will be working, like everyone starts to understand that Ukraine has a very nice and tasteful taste, and everyone then will understand that they want to listen to music, they want to know something more, not just about the war. So I'm thinking maybe in 2 years, I'm looking in 2 years forward, when we will finally have like maybe a few thousand restaurants all around the world, and when just citizen in I don't know, in Paris will just walk through the Ukrainian restaurant and will see the Ukrainian naming of Ukrainian restaurant, it will make a change. Now Ukraine, we were doing the marketing job, where we're trying to understand how what people think about Ukraine if they abroad. So we took it's actually me, but international relations ministry. They took the people from the US, people from Japan, and people from Italy. I hope they asked, "What do you know about Ukraine?" And everyone was thinking, "We know Chernobyl, we know a bit Klitschko, we know borscht, and then like something else." That means that the world are ready to have something new, and they see that Ukraine is Ukraine now have to give something to the world, but not just the conversations. They have to touch Ukraine, and if you will touch, if you will have opportunity to take the book, to listen to the music, but to have the food that will sell the Ukraine to the world. So, but the question, what is it Ukrainian cuisine? It's a problem, because in Ukraine still now not much people know what is that. Because if you will ask what you know about cuisine, people will say borscht, salo, vareniki, there will be pause, and everyone will think maybe banos, maybe krutcheniki, and so it's hard even for Ukraine now to understand what is that Ukrainian food, and so that's like I can speak about that for the few hours.
I hear.
But the main idea is that in future, Ukrainian cuisine is a new cuisine, new interesting cuisine, which will come on the first places in world trends. And people who is abroad should open Ukrainian cuisine and just need to read more about history. What is that?
I think you're really on your way, because you've been nominated as one of the 50 most influential people in terms of future gastronomy who are under 35. So congratulations for that. And I think we're all looking forward to this Ukrainian chain that appears everywhere around the world. But let me speak, Yevgenia, to you now more specifically, because you are everywhere. You are one of these global voices for Ukraine. And the story you're telling is not easy. You have you started to write a diary from the first day of the war, where you were in Ukraine, you were in Kiev. You kept that going until, I invited you to Venice, when kind of you were forced to stop. You're now back in Kiev. My question is, first of all, like, what does it mean for you to be one of these global voices? And do you feel that what you say and how you speak is also recognized? Do you feel you have impact with the voice and with the platforms that you've received?
I must be honest with you. It's it's almost impossible to write and to witness what I'm seeing around me if I'm imagining that I'm a global voice. I'm thinking about myself much more as a local voice, one of the many voices from Kiev, from Ukraine. And I was very happy about opportunity from the first day of the war, to start writing and to start to create some context, to use myself, my body, and my experience as something that can speak about this everyday growing of a crime that was happening in Ukraine. And now, when I was coming back to Kiev, actually, when I started writing my diary, we were speaking about that a lot. I was imagining that it will not happen, it will not take long, that the war, as we are seeing it now, cannot actually last more than several days. But then it developed, it proceeded, and today we see that yes, this incredible anachronistic and barbarian war is still happening. And the events are still developing, and I'm still witnessing not only a catastrophe that was happened, but also somehow in a strange parallel reality, it is still going on. I was hoping when you invited me, I was maybe having lots of illusions, but I was hoping when I will come back to Ukraine, I will work with the war as with history, not as with something that is expanding, is not as an ongoing tragedy, but as with a fresh history that happened with all of us. But now we are actually having a parallel processes. In some places of Ukraine, war has already become part of a history, and I hopefully, yes, like Kiev and places around Kiev, awful tragic history, but also very powerful history. And in some places of Ukraine, but yeah, I wouldn't say that. I'm actually, it is my mistake to put it this way. Actually, we have these parallel processes in all places of Ukraine. Modern war has two phases. One is a history that already happened and is disappearing, and we need to keep it. We need to ask questions, just to collect stories, to make this history really become our history. And another phase of this war is ongoing tragedy. And I think people who are working in Ukraine, working as a journalist or working as artists, writers, collecting the history, we are in a very strange position when we are trying actually, we are trying to give a voice to witnesses, to collect the stories of what was happening, but like it is already finished. And people around Kiev, when I visit places near Bucha, I see people who are already trying to renovate houses, and they are even working in their gardens. They are working in the gardens near ruined houses. And when I see how people are interacting with everything what has happened, they are trying with all the inner power that they have, to make this war already a history for them, to not to live as it is still going on. Even so, a part of them lives like it is still going on, but with some part of their body, of their mind, to finish this war and to create a place for the world after the war, where we will have Ukrainian products, like to create Ukrainian food, to think already about the future where no war will take place. You were asking me about the diary, and I'm trying to describe this complexity of the situation, and a big privilege to actually be here and be able to say even something. And you were also asking me about the impact. I hope very much that, yes, I hope very much that the voice and witnessing and document will have a big impact. Not only my diary, but lots of voices of people who were witnessing what is happening, what is going on. And all these voices will have an impact on the future history of the whole Europe, and will create a reality where something like this will not be possible again.
Thank you so much, Yevgenia. I think it's time to think about future and our cultural future. And I think many people here are working on this. And when I hear you speak, I hear you speak about how we need to enforce Ukrainian identity to the world. And Katya, I want to turn to you, because in your work, not only are you working on the past, but you're also working on translating that to a younger generation, trying to get that across. Please tell us how do you see, I mean, first of all, how do you do that? And then what is for you an ideal, say, impact or outcome from that project, looking towards kind of the next 2 or 3 years?
So I think that what I found with my work at the Shadows Project and understanding the way that my generation and young Ukrainians interact with their history and culture is that there truly is a desire to interact with Ukrainian history and culture, but a lot of young people don't know how to do that, because for a lot of young people it can feel very outdated when you're hearing stories and you're hearing traditions that your ancestors used to do hundreds of years ago. It doesn't necessarily match the reality that you are facing today, and it's hard to keep up these traditions when you feel as though it's not relevant to your day-to-day life as Gen Z in 2022. And for them, there's this desire to continue their culture and have this cultural continuity, but they don't know how to do that. And that leads me to your question as to how we can continue Ukrainian historical continuity and cultural continuity. And for us at Shadows, we believe that the only way for Ukraine, its culture, its history, and its traditions to live on is for it to be internalized in the young generation, for it to be lived in the young generation in our way. So for Gen Z to live through our traditions in a way that makes sense for us. Because if you give us a history textbook and you tell us, you know, to memorize these rituals and memorize what this means and that means, I don't know how many generations it's going to last for us to be passing it down to, because that puts the burden on our memories. But what you need for it to really live on is for us to actually live it in our way. So what we do at Shadows is a Gen Z take on Ukrainian history and culture. And the way we do that is we give our generation ways to understand their culture that impacts their day-to-day life today. So for example, one of the things you might find at Shadows is a literary cocktail menu. So you might be able to have a drink and flip through the cocktail menu and read about traditional Ukrainian literature. And then that's a way, you know, it also ties in the cultural aspect and the cuisine aspect, where when you can consume something, you can really internalize it and you can understand it in a different direction. Or you might be playing quizzes on our Instagram about, you know, Malevich, the famous avant-garde artist. One of our most famous quizzes was, is this Malevich or a geometry textbook? Because a lot of people make fun of his black square. And so, you know, you might flip through our page and flip through photos of geometry textbooks and Malevich paintings and try to decide which is which. And you're probably going to get a lot of them wrong, but what you'll walk away from it is you'll always remember what those Malevich paintings looked like, because you'll remember that feeling of being surprised and thinking, oh, I thought that was a geometry textbook, but it's Suprematist Composition number 3. And so these kinds of things that really impact your day-to-day life, that really give you autonomy and an immersion in the way that you can live your culture, is the only way for it to ensure that it really lives beyond us. Because then we can internalize it, then we can pass it on, we can tell our children, we can tell other generations in our own way, instead of the way that it was practiced 100 years ago. And this continuity is crucial to the existence of the Ukrainian state and its future.
Thank you very much. I wish that you were my art history teacher, I must say, and I'm an art historian. But let me play. You know, I'm going to ask you that question, and all of you know that I'm going to ask now a difficult question. We all speak about the history of Ukraine, and we all go into the history of Ukraine, but we can't forget 50 years of history of Ukraine, which is right now, you know, a part that we wish to forget. Which is the time of the Soviet Union. And you mentioned Malevich. You've made a strong case why you consider him a Ukrainian artist. There's others who might say he's not. What is your take? And I'll ask you all three. I'll first ask you, Katya, then Yevgenia, please, and then Yevgen. How do we deal with that part of history, which, you know, forms part of what all Ukrainians had to go through? Some might say this was a common history. What's your take on that? And, you know, what does Malevich have to do with it?
Well, I'll start by saying that we are trying to reclaim our history in our own way, but we're not in the business of erasing history. That was Stalin, and we're past that. And so our business is not erasing it and rewriting it, but rather really understanding it. And it is true, there is a shared history, but a shared history does not mean a loving history. A shared history does not mean it was a history of mutual respect. And I think that the word shared implies that it was, because it's something that you both take part in and sharing, but really, I think that it was shared in the sense that Russia was taking a lot from Ukraine, and Ukraine was not getting a lot back. And so it's very imperial and continues to be imperial for Russia today to assume that because we had a shared history and we existed in the same space, that it has ownership over us and those shared notions.
Thank you very much, Yevgenia. Would you like to pick up on that?
I actually agree with this, with all aspects of this statement of Katerina, and yeah, I think that it's an interesting question what to do with the past. Actually, this war that is happening today is showing us that Russia, our neighbor, hasn't done its homework, hasn't done its work on mistakes of the past, because it is a past of authoritarian, totalitarian state that was destroying its all best aspects of its own culture. And we are speaking today about the culture. This work on discovering the past, searching, researching, and rethinking about the past, but also acknowledging our own responsibilities, also Ukrainian responsibility for this past is very important. Not only to understand ourselves as victims of imperialism, but also see our active participation in the project of Soviet Union and to see it from different aspects. Maybe mainly critical, I would say so, and understand critically what was happening and how authoritarianism was built, but also thinking about just other very small aspects like utopical, theoretical thinking, building different ideas about the future that also were part of this Soviet project. But why it is very hard to speak about it right now? Why it is very hard to speak about anything that was common right now? Because I think that with this war, we see that lots of common ideas about common reality were actually maybe not as strong as we were imagining. And ideas about common cultural heritage or just power of the cultural heritage is also maybe needs to be rethought, because if this cultural heritage would be so powerful, if the common past would be really would mean connection and respect to each other, I don't think this war would be possible. So this war is a big provocation just for Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian intellectuals, and people who are understanding themselves as people who are thinking actively about politics, to reconsider what was it actually, what was Ukrainian part in the Soviet project, to restudy it and redefine it.
Thank you very much, Yevgenia. I think this is a question, you know, after victory that will have to be asked. And I think the way you approach this, you both actually, is admirable, and I think can be an example for many, not only Ukrainians, to think. Yevgen, do you want to add your own thoughts on this very complicated question?
I can add something. You know that my instrument is the food. Sometimes when I speaking about food, everyone thinks that it's not very serious thing, but I'm discovering our heritage, how we can say it, through the food. And I have one philosophical question. 99, maybe 100% of Ukrainians, they think that potato puree, is national Ukrainian dish. But if you will just understand the name of mashed potato, yeah, potato puree, it's French word. And that means that it's French national dish. So if we have the simplest products, the simplest dish in our brains, and we think that it's our national identity with the national heritage from USSR, so can you imagine how much different statements, which much more harder than potato puree, we have in our brains. So if you're speaking, my idea that his history and people who is writing history, they should write the history and should describe what has happened. But I don't want to take that period, because that period made only worse of me. Nobody asked, I will not just go again with the same ideas which now were spoken, but I think that we just should know our history, and we should understand that we should go back before the USSR created. We should understand what country we were, what country we had before the USSR. And we should take the main ideas, main traditions, and main things, and we should bring them in modern life, in a modern way, and we should start again to love them and to live a normal life. And we should forget about that nice period of USSR heritage, of all the things, it's. I think a lot of people will say that it's not good to forget the history, but I think that the period of the awfulest time in your life, our brain all the time wants to forget, and we just need to forget that and to build that country which we wanted to build before the USSR. And we should go there, and then we will go in the future. That's my statement. And
thank you.
I went to that through the food. Yeah.
You know, I just want to point out that Ukraine, there are very few countries in the world where you can have this type of conversation on that reflective and self-critical level while they're at war. This is very Ukrainian. You know, this is really beautiful about Ukraine. And before coming to a close, I have, you know, another question for all three of you, and also you know it. For me, we spoke a lot about the past, and somehow we also spoke a little bit about the future. But culture is a place for dreams. It's not only a place for research. It's a place for thinking and imagining the future. And for all three of you, what for you is, you know, if you're dreaming, what is the future culture of Ukraine? How do you identify Ukrainian culture, say, tomorrow after victory? Where does it go? Katya, you're physically here. I would like to hear you first speak.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I spent a lot of time dreaming about what Ukrainian culture is going to look like after victory. But I think that what means the most to me as a young Ukrainian that is only 21 years old, is coming into my identity and trying to figure out what Ukraine means to me. And I realized the privilege that I have and that my generation has that our ancestors did not have, which is the privilege to really have an open exploration, an open deep dive into our national identity. We're able to practice our national identity freely, openly, wear our traditional attire, eat our traditional food, do our rituals, celebrate the holidays we celebrate, and it's a privilege to be able to do that openly, which I also think gives us such a great opportunity for my generation to shape the future of Ukrainian culture. And I want to see it practiced even more openly. I want to see more and more young Ukrainians, even younger than I, being able to access it and go and interact with it in a very public way. Because as I said earlier, for most of Ukrainian history, its cultures has been practiced privately and has been repressed. And I want us to have the opportunity to continue to practice it publicly. So I want to see more fairs. I want to see more literature. I want to see more music festivals. I want to see more concerts. I want to see more restaurant pop-ups. I want to see everything coming to light. I want to be able to have it all and do it all and be able to talk about it freely.
I think it's already there and it's just going to keep going.
More.
Exactly. Yevgen, what is your dream?
When we speak about dream, we speak about you can dream and then you have to do it.
That's right.
So, you know, what I'm dreaming about two things, maybe five, but we'll speak about few of them. One of them is government. We don't speak here about government, but we forgot about them. But it's not good. I think that the politics of the culture, I think that culture has to be itself. But I think that government and president can help to go in a proper way. So what I'm dreaming about, that our government and our president, and a lot of people will think in a one way. We will think in a one language. We will think in one food, in a one understandable way where we should go. Because if you go to different ministers, you're asking where are we going, and you have different answers. Where are we going? And maybe we will start with just a normal politician understanding where we should go and who we are and what is that ours. And when nation will hear that, it will be much more easier to understand where we want to go. And that's the biggest dream, that we will speak about literature in a one way. We will understand Dostoevsky Ukrainian or not. We will understand Pushkin Ukrainian or not. We will understand Malevich, who is that. But if different people have different points of view, because our government don't understand too. So that's my biggest dream. And I think if they will rule, we will help, because we are helping it all the time. We are doing all the time. We are working for free for government. But please just hear us and help us to go in a good way. That's the biggest dream. All the music, all the fair, all the creative industries, everything in Ukraine will be fast developed. We can see that because we are very fast and creative in Ukraine. But we just need some huge support, not just small support, but it should be like very huge in cultural and very huge in education process. These two moments will help us to be to live in a much more cultural country, if I can say like that, in a years. And everything else will be like business will come, business will create something, will sell to the world, and this will develop. But that's just my one biggest dream.
Thank you very much. This was very beautiful. Yevgenia, I know that was the only question you liked from the ones that I prepared. So I'm sure your answer will be magical.
Oh, actually, it's just the question were sounding like a music to me, because it is a question about completely different world to that where I am living now, and I think that the question itself is very beautiful. I am traveling through Ukraine right now, and I was traveling first a lot through very small cities in Ukraine in 2014, and I discovered lots of different small worlds that are, I would say, not really represented. We know that RP do exist, but we don't know what is happening on the streets of this city. And my idea about the future Ukraine is when we have much more small cultural events and realities locally in different parts of Ukraine. And different parts of Ukraine can speak for themselves, represent themselves and create together with all of us this future Ukrainian culture.
Thank you very much. So we have some minutes left, and I want to look at the audience. If there would be any questions to either of our participants, then now is the time to ask. I think there is a mic. If someone has a question, please raise your hand. So there is one question there. Please say also to whom you address the question.
To Katya. Just wanted to learn a little bit more about the situation with Malevich and what Shadows has done to fix that.
Yeah, so I mentioned Malevich a little bit earlier, and he is one of the figures that Shadows campaigns for a lot, because in many museums, in most respected museums around the world, he's labeled as Russian, born Ukraine. And they don't go so far as to say he's Ukrainian. They say that he's Russian and that he was born in Ukraine, but they don't allow him to have that Ukrainian identity. And I think Malevich is such a clear case of the Russian misinformation campaign and the way Russia has been able to blur the lines, because if anyone bothered to do even just a few minutes of research about Malevich, they would be able to find his autobiographies, his diaries, in which he himself wrote in his own words, "I'm Ukrainian." Malevich has a history of writing down Ukrainian as his nationality in the documents. And so this is something that is very easy to research, which is why the lack of effort on behalf of international institutions to recognize that and to do the research and to do the work shows how deep Russian misinformation goes, because there's this underlying umbrella assumption that he's Russian, and they don't really bother to actually dig in deeper because they assume that it's fine, that it's the same, that it doesn't mean anything. And Malevich, we campaign to get him properly labeled a lot because it's such an easy thing. You can Google, you can whip out Google and look at his diaries and see his own handwriting right there and then. And the fact that there isn't enough of an initiative by museums to do that shows how deep the complacency goes.
Thank you very much. I want to follow up on that by saying that this question, and not only around Malevich, but the question about how Russia has very successfully pushed its own cultural narratives, is one of the biggest problems, I would say, the art world faces. And as Ukraine, one of the things we should go and do is push every institution to look at their own collections. I'll give one example. There is in Pompidou, this, for some of you might know, they received this great donation called Kolekcja. That was several years ago. That was given by a Russian foundation. And for those Ukrainians who went to see what Kolekcja stood for, we discovered so many Ukrainian artists labeled as not Ukrainian. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every institution needs to have the intellectual and academic honesty and vigilance to go back right now and to say we do no longer accept how Russia has pushed its own cultural narratives on our collections that we, from an intellectual perspective, are responsible for. And we have to ask ourselves question about that. I know I'm just the moderator here, so I'll go but I find this a very important topic. And I think everybody here in the room who is, if you're either a member of a board or you have a position of influence for institutions, that's exactly what you have to go and hammer on. You don't have to hammer on, cut that from the collection or rename it like this. Just hammer on, do your damn research and ask questions that need to be asked from an academic perspective with intellectual honesty. And automatically, in a long term, Ukrainian culture will gain an incredible width and depth inside of international museums who safeguard, for example, a lot of constructivist of avant-garde artists. So that being my small contribution to this panel. There is one more question. I think.
So my question is for Yevgenia. And I just want to preface by saying I have really enjoyed hearing your voice today, and I think it's very important that we, and this panel, very important that we hear the voices here, and that Ukraine has a voice, has something to say, and we need to give them space and platform, and I just love that we have Ukraine House Davos. So Yevgenia, what are the vulnerable voices that we are not hearing right now? Whose voices need to be heard now?
I think it's a very hard question, actually, because we are in war now, right now, and war is very much polarizing societies, and war is very much looking for an easy answer, and Ukraine is fighting. And vulnerable voices, they always ask much more questions and than give just easy answers, which sometimes are just in an urgent need for culture, for the country that is surviving. So I'm more thinking about being ready to hear these voices as to hear them right now, and just and to give space to speak, to create for the future safe spaces where people will be ready to say whatever they want to say and to be heard, to create this future Ukraine where the freedom of thought and freedom of speech will be really established. So in my view, it is not a time to make people speak, because a lot of people under this violent situation, they are speaking a lot, but they want to keep their voice silent. Like when I'm visiting Irpin or Bucha or places around Kiev and even Kiev, people are speaking to me, and then I ask them, may I also make a photo of you? And lots of people, like at Ver in Donbass, are saying, no, rather not. You already like wrote down what I have said, and that I don't want to, with my face, I don't want to be near these words, because this war is making everybody feel incredibly vulnerable, actually. And this vulnerability is abnormal, because people cannot be safe in their own houses. So today, I think we have to create this future safe spaces, intellectual safe spaces, where people, without having a feeling that they will be attacked by the majority, by some imagined majority, I don't think that they really would be attacked. But we have to create some safe spaces where everybody will have a feeling that no attack will happen, and everybody from Ukraine with their experience could speak and could say what they experienced, what was their vision, and how they see practically their reality, what is happening, what happened with their life. And yeah, and on this level, different kind of society, even more free society will be created.
Thank you so much. I think our time is up. What leaves me is to thank really on behalf of everybody, all of you, Yevgen, Yevgenia, and Katya, thank you so much for contributing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.